So, James, we've just had Albanese deliver a report on the situation in Palestine. But this is not Anthony Albanese, is it?
No, this is not our Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, although she does share the surname with Anthony Albanese. She does not, or he does not share her, shall we say, vigour and courage and support for just human rights in general. Yes. I'm talking, of course, about Francesca Albanese.
Yeah, and who is Francesca Albanese, James?
Well, Geordie, Francesca Albanese is since 2022, is the UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories. Yep. So I guess her job is to go in as part of like a UN-sanctioned mission. Yep. Go in and essentially, analyse the situation there and, write reports and make recommendations on what's happening there.
And you could argue then that her reports and analysis are pretty free of bias?
I would say they're very free of bias. Yep. As she has continually stressed in all of her interviews and lectures that she's done, she is there purely looking at the situation as an international lawyer from a purely legal perspective, and that seems to have been the angle that she has taken when undertaking this work.
So what is in the report, James?
Well, Geordie, look, before we get started on the report, I just want to play a little game with you and with our audience. Okay. So I'm going to get two pictures here up on the screen, and I want you to spot the difference. All right. So on the left, we have the aforementioned Francesca Albanese. Yes. And on the right, we have two gentlemen shaking hands. Yes. The gentleman on the far right with the beard is Ahmed al-Sharaa, the newly self-proclaimed president of Syria.
Also known as Al-Julani.
Al-Julani, yes. Correct. Yep. And the man he is shaking hands with is the UK Minister of
Foreign Minister
David Lammy. David Lammy, correct. Now, the difference between... So we're just going to ignore David Lammy for a second. Okay. What is the difference between Francesca Albanese and Julani?
Well,
look, there's a few.
There's a couple that come to mind. I would argue that the one on the left has not had a career as a terrorist. Yep. And the one on the right has potentially been a terrorist and headed Al-Qaeda at points in his life.
Look, you're close to the mark, Jordy. So
close to the mark?
You're close to the mark. So did Francesca Albanese lead a foreign-backed and funded Islamist extremist organisation in a 10-year dirty war against a secular government? She did not.
No, she did not.
These are some of the possible similarities that they could share. Okay. Did she orchestrate in mass terror campaigns against a civilian population? No.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Did she send suicide car bombers into shopping centres?
No.
No. Did she allow her followers to kidnap hundreds or even thousands of women and force them into forced marriages and sexual slavery?
The Israel lobby may say yes, but I will say no.
Say no, thank you. Or did she also encourage her same followers to undertake waves of sectarian violence that has resulted in the deaths of thousands of individuals of minority populations like Druze, Christians and Alawis?
I will once again commit with no.
Well, you would be correct, Geordie. Okay. That was Mr. Sharaa. Yep. Francesca Albanese has done none of those things. Okay. So they do not share that in common. Yes. One thing they do share in common is their position. They have both been sanctioned. Yes. The difference is, however, unlike the former leader of Al-Qaeda in Syria, Julani, he has recently had sanctions on himself lifted. Yes. Whereas Francesca Albanese has just been sanctioned by the United States.
Okay. And at this point, it's almost an honour to be sanctioned by the US.
It is an honour to be sanctioned by the US.
You're doing something right.
You are doing something right. And again, conversely, if they're lifting sanctions on you, you're probably not doing something right, as we could discern. So who is Francesca Albanese and why has she just been sanctioned? Yeah. So she's essentially been one of the most vocal and outspoken critics of the illegal Israeli occupation. Yes. In the occupied territories. So she was trained as an international lawyer, and she has essentially centred on human rights and human rights in international law. So she actually, I believe, said she went into the human rights field as opposed to being like a practicing lawyer, because I think she deemed she could do more good for the world from that position. So she's previously worked in worked for the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights and the UN Relief Works Agency, again, before being assigned the role of the Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories in 2022. So she's had
a lot of experience.
Specifically in the Middle East and North Africa.
And through the UN. Yeah.
Yes. This position has seen her gain a lot of credibility internationally, especially since October 2023, where in response to the aggression against the Palestinian peoples, she's travelled all over the world, given speeches, lectures, interviews, again, trying to raise awareness and trying to provide her insight as someone that has, again, been on the ground and worked a lot in this field and what she has found.
She came to Australia, I believe, last year and addressed the National Press Council.
Yes, and she received rapturous applause. Despite that, she will probably not be coming back here.
She might get sanctioned by Australia.
Oh, the horror. But this has naturally caused her to draw the ire of the kind of Ziocon elites that run the Western, kind of security establishment. So she's... being criticised as being anti-Semitic, and this has kind of reached a new level of insanity when being sanctioned by the the US Department of Secretary under the Don, under Executive Order 14203, naming her a specially designated national and therefore forbidding US persons and companies from doing business with her, which if you work for the United Nations is headquartered in New York.
Yeah, it makes her job very difficult.
It does make her job very difficult. And also, I guess, it's another tool that the US and Israel and the West is slowly using to kind of slowly degrade, or not really slowly anymore, but these multilateral international frameworks and institutions that we have and that we all purport to abide by, essentially.
Yeah. So she's actually been sanctioned from travelling to her work then, in effect?
Well, I'd imagine that would involve her doing some sort of business with a US person or company.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure on the specifics, but I'd imagine, I guess theoretically, she wouldn't be able to, because that would involve her going to the US and, being engaged economically with a United States, business or person.
I wish the US sanctioned me from going to work.
Yeah, can you imagine that? Sorry, boss, I can't give in. I've just been sanctioned, man. So what was the precipitating factor in this? Obviously, she's been criticised by the US administration for a while, the Biden and the Trump administration. What was the precipitating factor? Well, about a week and a bit ago, the UNHCR released a report titled From the Economy of Occupation to the Economy of Genocide, in which researchers thoroughly examine and analyse the complicity of not just state actors, but also large multinational corporations in the ongoing occupation and now genocide of the Palestinians. So I've read through this report a few times. Very informative and very interesting. It essentially lays out, as I just said, the role that large multinational corporations play, not just state actors, but how they are all complicit equally in sustaining the occupation, and how, again, as the title reads, the occupation, the economy of occupation has now turned into an economy of genocide, with many different companies from all over the world in a variety of sectors, not just like the military, industrial and security complex, but across, all kind of economic sectors, incredible variety, how lots of them are intertwined with the Israeli state, and how in its current form, the Israeli state exists to a certain extent because of the occupation. And a large portion of its economy comes from the occupation and this ongoing genocide also. So I've got quite a bit of reading to do, and we're going to go over some of the points, talk about some of the companies that she's mentioned, and have a bit of a discussion about it as well. And there's some interesting ones in there. So the opening lines of the report summarise the situation perfectly, and I'm quoting: colonial endeavours and their associated genocides have historically been driven and enabled by the corporate sector. Commercial interests have contributed to the dispossession of Indigenous people and lands, a mode of domination known as colonial racial capitalism. So it goes on to lay out the various ways in which corporate expansion into the region has gone hand in hand with displacement, destruction and ethnic cleansing. It goes a lot deeper than just the complicity of weapons manufacturers, entities like Elbit Systems and Israeli Aerospace Industries, which we have spoken about before. They work closely with the Israeli state to develop new technologies and enhance not only their profit margins, but their ability to end human life. Anthony Lowenstein, a fantastic journalist from Australia, has written a fantastic book called The Palestine Laboratory, which we have discussed in the past on the show. And that is actually referenced some of his findings in this report. So just to break it down, the IT security and technology sector is very present. You have companies like IBM, Microsoft, and Hewlett-Packard are all very active in Israel and the occupied territories. Many of these companies have opened subsidiary branches in Israel to further facilitate their operations in the region. Companies like Amazon, Alphabet, and Google have contracts with the Israeli government and provide lots of the cloud infrastructure in which the occupation relies. Found it quite funny. IBM, going back to their roots, if anyone does not know, IBM actually was complicit in the Nazi Holocaust during the Second World War because they used their computational technologies to essentially track and manage the large populations of Jewish, Slavic, Polish inmates in the extermination camps. And they have, again, continued. So they've obviously realised that's what we're good at and we're going to keep doing it here. So they have managed the database of the Population, Immigration and Border Authority, where they have enabled the collection, storage and governmental use of biometric data against the Palestinians. Not only have you had foreign corporations engaging in this activity, but the occupation has also been instrumental in the development of countless other technology/security firms that are indigenous, little wink, wink, nudge, nudge there, to Israel, like the NSO group, who have close contacts to Israel's Unit 8200. They developed the Pegasus spyware, and you kind of have a revolving door within Israel between the military, the security sector, and the tech sector.
Yeah, as you do in the US and other countries.
As you do in the US, in Israel, it is incredibly concentrated due to the small population and also the large preponderance that these corporations and that structure has in the economy. Yeah. They are a key node in the burgeoning AI scene, the AI tech startup scene, I guess. So they have pioneered these AI technology systems like Lavender, Gospel, and Where's Daddy to generate targeting lists for the military. So this has pretty much reshaped warfare completely. None of this would be possible without possibly one of the most nefarious corporate entities to stalk the planet today, Palantir Technologies.
I'm sorry, James, I just have to stop you. They come up with these fabulous names, as they do for their operations in Palestine.
In Palestine,
like Lavender and Where's Daddy.
Where's Daddy, yeah. But the naming conventions aside, these are AI systems that are used to essentially generate targets for assassination.
Yes.
And that might be based on, there was one person who was a known kind of enemy operative, whether that's someone that's politically inconvenient for the Israeli occupation, whether that's someone that is associated with Hamas or PIJ or something like that. Yeah. And then, for example, if the metadata from my phone happened just to show that I was in the same building as the metadata from this other person's phone, then the AI system would put me through its computational analysis and decide, he's a target. So that takes all the decision-making away from human beings.
Yes.
So it dehumanizes the people being attacked. It also dehumanizes the attacker.
Yeah.
Further removes them from what they're doing, from the cruelty and the destruction that they are causing.
So it's really like the digitization of the genocide.
Yeah, of the warfare and of the occupation. I think we're going to see a lot more of this. We've seen this has really kind of changed how we do war and how we do conflict. For sure. We've seen that as well as in Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah.
We've seen, electronic warfare, asymmetric warfare, the use of drones, for example. And all these things which are terrifying, in my opinion. Long gone are the days where you just stare down your enemy with a bayonet and go at each other. No, you will most likely be killed in a modern war before, without even seeing it coming, essentially. Yeah. By a drone, by some, a cafe shop owner in Tel Aviv who's doing his military, conscription for 6 months, from 1,000 kilometers away on a laptop. Yeah, and kill you with a suicide drone. It's not as glorifying. But in terms of Palantir, so I'm actually looking at doing a bigger segment on Palantir and the kind of these kind of dark AI forces that are slowly capturing the globe. But as the owner of Palantir has said, so their involvement in Israel actually far predates October 2023. However, their technologies have become critical in the continuing of the occupation of the genocide. So I've got a quick quote here from the report. There are reasonable grounds to believe Palantir has provided automatic predictive policing technologies, core defence infrastructure for rapid and scaled-up construction and deployment of military software, and its artificial intelligence platform, which allows real-time battlefield data integration for automated decision-making. In January 2024, Palantir announced a brand new strategic partnership with Israel and held a board meeting in Tel Aviv in solidarity. In April 2025, Palantir's CEO responded to accusations that Palantir had killed Palestinians in Gaza by saying, yeah, mostly terrorists, that's true. So we have a CEO of a corporation admitting out in the open that his software and his company has been used to kill people and has killed people. So we're not only talking about the direct weapons of war and destruction, but this report also talks about kind of some of the less well thought about sides of the occupation. So things like construction companies, civilian construction companies. So they provided heavy equipment for the IDF and settler groups to engage in the literal demolition of Palestinian life. So typically, if you want to remove someone from their land, the best way to do it is you can kick them out and, send them a few kilometres down the road. However, if you want them to not come back, then you demolish their house and you demolish their village. Yeah. And that way, there's nothing for them to come back to. You destroy what defined their life in the old territory so you can occupy and exploit it. Groups like Caterpillar, Volvo, Hyundai are all complicit in supplying the necessary heavy machinery to undertake these tasks. In fact, Israel has evolved the Caterpillar, the D9 bulldozer, into an automated, remote-controlled pillar at the core of Israeli warfighting, having this piece of equipment deployed in every conflict since 2000. So they've essentially have a contract with Caterpillar to develop their bulldozers. They heavily arm them, and that way they can just send them into highly urbanised areas, heavily armed, and which they're pretty much impervious to small arms fire, and then they can just demolish buildings. As we know, the war that Israel wages isn't about killing people per se, but it's about the destruction of the civilization. That was there beforehand, and that plays into it as well. That's one part of the occupation, but you also have the construction of new settler infrastructure over the top of the existing civilization that was there beforehand. So you have new settlements in occupied territories, and they are connected with Israel through, construction and development of new roads and public transport infrastructure. So, for example, in the West Bank, if you had a Palestinian village in one location, and then you had the existing road infrastructure, for example, kind of connecting that to other villages and hubs in the area, you would have your brand spanking new Israeli settlement, which might be located, a kilometre or two away. And then when you build the highways there, you completely bypass the Palestinian roads. So you cut them out of the lifeline of economic activity, which then essentially expands the Israeli infrastructure deeper and deeper into the Palestinian territories. And you have, again, foreign companies involved in all of this, from, supplying, like fixtures, again, construction equipment. You also have things like there was a Spanish Basque company building new tracks and stations in the West Bank, so building trains and that sort of stuff as well.
On behalf of the Israelis? On behalf of the Israelis. Okay. As a fellow Spaniard, that must hit you.
Yeah, and I did find it interesting that they're a joint Spanish-Basque company, considering the Basques are probably more ideologically aligned with the Palestinians in their struggle for an end to what they consider unlawful occupation by the Spanish government. Quite interesting, but it just shows how realpolitik and profit matters more than ideology at the end of the day, which is really unfortunate. Another interesting part of the report that is outlined is Israel's energy supplies. Obviously, foreign corporations, oil companies, resource companies, they have always been at the centre of Middle Eastern conflict, as we know. whether that's conflict for actually, control of direct resources, or whether it's conflict over pipelines, distribution, transit routes. Yep. These have pretty much since the early 1900s, these have always been a pivotal aspect of Western intervention in the region.
Yep.
So the apartheid regime's energy supplies come from companies like Drummond Company and Swiss Glencore. So they supply over 60% of Israel's coal supplies. And BP and Chevron are some of the largest contributors to Israel for crude oil, as they are the major owners of the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline and the Kazakh-Caspian pipeline consortium. Interestingly enough, you have countries like Turkey, who rhetorically, anytime Erdogan, anytime his position is looking a bit shaky in Turkey, he'll come out in vigorous support for the Palestinian resistance, condemn Israel. All the Turks support that, obviously, because they see what's going on. He gets a bit more domestic support, but at the same time, he is facilitating oil deliveries
and natural gas,
again through the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline to Israel from Turkey,
and other pipelines that go from Central Asia into Israel.
Correct. Yeah. And not only that, we've talked about this before, expansive gas fields offshore in the Mediterranean.
Yes.
Specifically the Leviathan and Tamar gas fields. So they are perfectly positioned to be exploited for Israel's energy needs. The only problem is that they're in Palestinian territorial waters.
And so this is off the coast of Gaza?
Correct.
In the Mediterranean?
In the Mediterranean. Yep. And I believe there are other gas fields as well that Lebanon actually has claim to.
Yep.
But as the Lebanese state is not really functional, and the Syrian state is not really functional.
Easy for Israel to exploit it.
Yep. Absolutely. So this may have something also to do with the naval restrictions that are imposed on Palestinians, preventing them from accessing the ocean proper from the besieged Gaza Strip. As we know, you often hear stories about, for example, Palestinian fishermen. They're restricted to within like a kilometre or two of the shoreline. And if you stray out that, there'll be Israeli naval vessels that cordon people in. Obviously, that's to restrict their claim to the waters in general.
Yeah.
It's also, to restrict their access to actually fish for
food.
To actually fish for food. These gas fields are all illegally operated by Chevron and Israeli NewMed Energy, who extract the natural gas from these fields, and in 2023 paid the Israeli government $453 million in royalties and taxes. It's more than the Australian government gets in royalties and taxes from our resource extraction, but that's all right. Won't go there in this episode.
At least the Israelis stand up to multinationals. get some royalties off them.
That's it, 100%.
Wow.
And that gas is then either used to supply, the domestic market in Israel, or it's exported for sale on foreign markets. Yeah. And then Chevron profits from the partial ownership of the East Mediterranean gas pipeline, which passes through Palestinian maritime territory. Again, if the Palestinians had proper representation and a proper state structure, these corporations would not be able to keep doing what they're doing in the same way that they are. You'd have to pay royalties to the Palestinians, or maybe the Palestinians might decide, hey, we want to have a different contract, maybe with a Russian company or an Iranian company or a Chinese company. Or we want to nationalise. Or we want to nationalise, exactly, which is a big, big no-no.
Yeah, of course.
As we know. In terms of, it's not just hydrocarbon resources, in terms of food and water resources as well. I'm just going to read this paragraph here, which is directly taken from the report. Israel forces Palestinians to purchase water sourced from 2 major aquifers in their own territory at inflated prices and with intermittent supply. The Israeli National Water Company, Mekorot, pardon my pronunciation, has a water monopoly in the occupied Palestinian territory. In Gaza, more than 97% of water from a coastal aquifer is contaminated, making residents dependent on Mekorot pipelines for most of their drinking water. For at least the first 6 months, post-October 2023, Mekorot ran its Gaza pipelines at 22% capacity, leaving areas such as Gaza City without water 95% of the time, actively aiding the transformation of water into a tool of genocide. Yeah. And I'm going to expand on another point once I've talked about this next point. However, despite all the high technology, the globally integrated AI networks that profit and benefit from the occupation, the original most basic distillation of displacement and land settlement still plays a role. like just basic displacement for agricultural expansion. So you remove the indigenous people from their lands to occupy them and use them to serve settler colonial interests, which you can then use if you're growing agricultural products. You can attract global attention, gain market dominance, and then all the while you're doing this, you increase your profits and you also destroy the Palestinian food systems, accelerating their displacement, but also creating dependency, because you have created a captive market. If they can't make their own food, process their own water, or even import their own foodstuffs, then you control what they get. So I can sell it to them, therefore increasing the profit. Yeah. This, which I thought was quite interesting. Israel's largest food production company, Tenuva, which is majority owned by the Chinese Bright Dairy and Food Company Limited, has fueled and benefited from land dispossession and the establishment of the kibbutzim. They source many of the products from settler agricultural enterprises. They seize the Palestinian land, deprive them of their ability to feed themselves, and now have a captive market with which they supply with food. After the destruction of Gaza's dairy industry in 2014, Palestinian dependence on the Israeli dairy industry has increased by 160%.
Wow.
Not only does that create a market which you exploit, but then, as we have seen with the famine conditions that these people are suffering through at the moment, it also allows you to just turn the tap off.
Yeah.
So, incredible, like horrible.
Yeah.
A disgusting thing, but it's all interrelated. So despite the supposed ethical sourcing guidelines of many global food suppliers and retailers, Israeli products produced in occupied lands still make their way into global supply chains. To avoid the obvious and growing backlash, companies often do not differentiate the source of the products, so they don't specify whether it was made in Palestine, in the occupied territories, or in Israel proper. Even in the EU, where they're quite strict on their food labelling, these goods are still allowed to compete in the markets. So the choice is at the end of the day up to the consumer. And lots of these things, it comes down to consumer choice to boycott. That's what the BDS, boycott, divestment, sanctions movement is all about. So there are certain aspects and many aspects of the ongoing occupation which are as old as time itself. The expropriation of land, of water, food resources, natural resources. But then you have these weird ones, which are really could only exist in this little period of time that we exist in right now.
A modern kind of 21st century style of colonialism.
Yeah.
Opposed to the European classic kind of go in, take the land, natural resources.
But then you have this one which truly transcends any kind of national identity, and that is occupation tourism. So this is what I'd imagine
it just would really despotic.
Really would appeal to your kind of European kind of liberal elites.
Okay.
So what's been and it has been reported on quite a bit, is companies like Airbnb and Booking.com hosting and listing residences that are on occupied land.
Okay.
So you'll have, it'll be a romantic getaway for two in and amongst nature, but it'll be, a brand new Israeli settlement.
Okay. When you said,
or you have things like, rustic, old, traditional home, perfect for family looking for a holiday, but it'll be, the house that used to belong to a Palestinian in the village in a village in the West Bank somewhere.
Yeah. Okay.
And some settler has taken it. I mean, I guess look, you got to give it to the settlers. They're making considering they got the house for nothing, they're just making their money where they can.
Yeah.
So you're just renting it out.
When you said colonial tourism, I sort of imagined busloads of European tourists going through the refugee camps. Yeah. But here are the occupied
peoples. Yeah. Pretty soon, man, it's going to be like late 1800s Europe, where they're just going to get people from the Pacific Islands, put them in a cage, take them back to London, and be like, look, there's a tiger, there's a native islander from whatever country. Yeah. I would honestly not be surprised if they started doing that in Israeli museums.
No.
At this stage. But we did have, just a side note, there was also occupation and war tourism that we saw, I believe, earlier on in the year and last year, when you had Israeli tour companies taking boats of people offshore of the Gaza Strip from the main Israel proper, so they could spend the night watching Gaza get bombed.
How terrific.
It is horrific, and I can just imagine people taking their kids and, what are we doing tonight? We're going to the movies? No, let's go watch Gaza get bombed. It's truly a level of inhumanity that blows my mind. And companies like Airbnb and Booking.com have responded in such ways where they've, taken down these listings, or they've requested the people, or they've said they've taken down the listings, but more listings like this keep popping up. Yeah. But they will because obviously any listing for them is good for business. It doesn't matter where it is. If you book, then they get a portion of that fee. So for them, I think it's more an issue of, well, just don't make it so blatant. Yeah. We come to the financial sector, which is possibly the most opaque and wide-reaching aspect of this wider economy. As we know, the financial sector in Israel is intricately tied to the Western financial centre, based in Wall Street and the City of London. The Israeli state and the occupation would not be possible were it not for the continuous financial support and investment from transnational capital. For example, in order to fund their expansion in military activity post-2023, the Israeli government issued bonds to fund its budget deficit, which have been bought by some of the world's largest banks and investment firms, banks like Barclays and BNP Paribas. Firms like BlackRock, Vanguard and Allianz also have stepped in to boost the market confidence. So these bonds were purchased by over 400 investors in 36 countries. So every person that owns, I guess if we're following the legal progression, every person or entity that has purchased these bonds, essentially has bought up the Israeli deficit.
That's right, government debt.
The government debt, so they can continue their increased military budget, which is being used to extend this occupation and genocide, is complicit. Yeah. I guess we can put it that way. Yeah. I'm quoting now a direct quote from the report. BlackRock is the second largest institutional investor in Palantir, 8.6%, Microsoft, 7.8%, Amazon.com, 6.6%, Alphabet, 6.6%, and IBM, 8.6%, and the third largest in Lockheed Martin, 7.2%, and Caterpillar, 7.5%. Vanguard is the largest institutional investor in Caterpillar at 9.8%, Chevron 8.9%, and Palantir 9.1%, and second largest in Lockheed Martin at 9.2%, and Elbit Systems at 2%. Through their asset management, while implicating universities, pension funds, and ordinary people who passively invest their savings through the purchase of their funds and EFTs. That's what I wanted to talk about as well, was sovereign wealth funds. So sovereign wealth and pension funds the world over are also integrated and tied up into this system. Some of the most significant financiers, this includes the Norwegian Government Pension Fund Global, and also one of the largest Canadian pension funds. And I'd imagine there would be lots of Australian-based super funds that also have investments that trickle their way down into these companies, which I find interesting, especially when people talk about everyone in Australia. They love to talk about the Norwegian sovereign, the government sovereign, they have this sovereign wealth fund, they tax their resource companies. It's amazing. And then they can provide everyone with free education and healthcare. And we hear this a lot in Australia.
And we've talked about it. As a model, it's a good idea.
It works well. Yeah. But there is still blood on their hands at the end of the day. So we can look at this kind of, the Western kind of sock-down left loves this concept, of saying, look what the state can do, obviously with the smart investment and management of their resources, look what they can give back to their populations. But no, they're still complicit in one way or another in this genocide, in the occupation. And I'd imagine the exact same thing would be present with Australian pension funds as well. Yeah. What I find interesting is a couple years ago, there was a lot of talk about ESGs, which were like a corporate governance score. And I remember lots of people on the right, I believe they're called ESGs, I can't remember exactly what it stands for, but lots of people on the kind of libertarian right were talking about essentially what an ESG is a company would be given a score based on kind of these kind of liberal values. So like, inclusion, diversity, equity, environmental factors and how it plays in. And then your company would be given an ESG score. So it didn't necessarily have anything to do with its financial performance, but it was more to do with kind of these kind of liberal ideals.
The moral facade.
Yeah, exactly. And so I remember it was a big thing during the Biden administration, when obviously anything that was kind of vaguely corporate left was used. Oh, the deep state's taking over. You know, all the far right commentators were talking about, but they were talking about how all these ESG scores are gonna, you know, destroy businesses if you have a poor ESG score, for example. Yeah. One thing I found was funny was that investment in Israel and Israeli companies and occupied investments and endeavours in the occupied territories were completely removed from any sort of ESG scoring, which I thought was very funny, which just shows the sheer hypocrisy, as well as on top of trying to, again, like you said, put a facade onto kind of extractive corporate capitalism. They just excluded that from the equation in general, which I find was quite funny. So, look, there's a lot of info there. We've talked about a lot of stuff, but I would recommend everyone go over and read the report. You can just find it. You just Google UNHCR report, Palestinian territories.
Or even listen to her on a podcast talk about it.
Yes, and she is an incredibly well-spoken.
She is.
Powerful, just what you'd want, like a very good representative of humanity, I think.
You expect a rapporteur working for the United Nations to be like. And she exemplifies the professionalism.
The professionalism, exactly. And she's talked about before when she came to Australia and spoke in front of the press club, I believe there was some kind of vague pushback questions from like Sky
from
and
Sky
whatnot.
News, and she eviscerated them.
And she just said, look, I don't have any ideological bias. I'm just reporting the facts that I'm seeing. That is
what's happening.
That is what is dictating my response and my analysis is the facts that I'm seeing. Like at the end of the day, it's not a political thing. It's just I'm going there and I'm seeing these people get genocided. I'm seeing these corporations complicit.
Profiteering.
I'm seeing this state happen. It's not a political thing, but I'm just, that's what it is.
Yeah.
And unlike Mr. Shara, who we, Mr. Jelani, who we showed earlier, she is an excellent representative of the good of humanity. Unlike that gentleman and David Lammy, who in my opinion are terrible representatives of humanity as a whole. So just to conclude, I'm just going to quote a little bit from the report here. The Special Rapporteur urges member states of the United Nations to impose sanctions and a full arms embargo on Israel, including all existing agreements and dual-use items such as technology and civilian heavy machinery, to suspend, prevent all trade agreements and investment relations, and impose sanctions, including asset freezes on entities and individuals involved in activities that may endanger the Palestinians, to enforce accountability, ensuring that corporate entities face legal consequences for their involvement in serious violations of international law. The Special Rapporteur urges corporate entities to promptly cease all business activities and terminate relations directly linked with contributing to and causing human rights violations and international crimes against the Palestinian people in accordance with international corporate responsibilities and the law of self-determination, to pay reparations to the Palestinian people, including in the form of an apartheid wealth tax along the lines of post-apartheid South Africa. The Special Rapporteur urges the International Criminal Court and national judiciaries to investigate and prosecute corporate executives and or corporate entities for their part in the commission of international crimes and the laundering of the proceeds from those crimes. Special Rapporteur urges the United Nations to comply with the International Court of Justice Advisory Opinion of 2024 to include all entities involved in Israeli unlawful occupation in the United Nations database. The Special Rapporteur urges trade unions, lawyers, civil society and ordinary citizens to press for boycotts, divestment, sanctions, justice for all Palestine and accountability at international and domestic levels. Together we can end these unspeakable crimes. This report is written at the cusp of a profound and tumultuous transformation. Globally witnessed atrocities require urgent accountability and justice, which demands diplomatic, economic and legal action against those who have maintained and profited from an economy of occupation turned genocidal. What comes next depends on all of us.
Yeah.
Which I think is very powerful.
Yeah, it is.
And it's a very powerful conclusion, I think, and that is the kind of thing, the kind of action that lots of people in the kind of anti-Zionist, anti-occupation movement worldwide have kind of advocated for, that position of just, boycott, divest, don't buy the products, make sure your investments aren't going towards them. However, as we can see, and I've just outlined a little bit of this, the sheer complexity of this economy and how it ties into the global economy. Yes. For example, if they've kind of pinned large sections of the global economy on their success in being able to do what they do, especially with lots of these large firms. So, I mean, I can see a situation where if hypothetically, and left-hook media does not endorse this position specifically, but if the Israeli state were to collapse, the resounding effect on the repercussions on the global economy would be far more significant than if just another country of 7 million people state collapsed, if that makes sense. And it is designed to be in such a way so that they do have this kind of insurance policy against being told to stop what they're doing. So just to finish off here, the imposition of sanctions against Albanese follows in a series of attacks by the global hegemon, that's the US, against multilateral government and global institutions like the ICJ, and the sanctions placed against the ICC head prosecutor Karim Khan. US Secretary of State Marco, affectionately known as Narco Rubio, was quoted with saying, Albanese's campaign of political and economic warfare against the United States and Israel will no longer be tolerated. And Albanese herself has said that the sanctions were obscene and she was being punished for her pursuit of justice. I think what I want to talk about, the reason I think why this report specifically has received so much backlash and so much condemnation is because many of these corporations that have been listed have net worths larger than the GDPs of many states.
Yeah, they're major US corporations. A company like Microsoft or Apple, Amazon. These would all be like top 20 global economies in terms of their size. It is truly insane. Those who facilitate and benefit from this global circulation of capital are the ones who are truly in control of what happens on the global stage. While we can criticise individual states all we want, laying blame on the companies themselves ties direct culpability in these crimes against humanity with their pursuit of profits. It is even possible that in the future we could see the heads of these companies prosecuted for their complicity. So the report does outline this. The post-Holocaust industrialist trials have already laid the groundwork for recognising the international criminal responsibility of corporate executives for participation in international crimes. And I think this is why we're seeing such an outburst. Heads of state come and go. They can be sent to trial and found guilty and punished for their crimes. Corporate power structures typically are not held to the same standards despite their equal and shared responsibility. So I think this report attempts to overcome and bridge that gap between these two aspects. The whole purpose of a corporation, an LLC, a limited liability corporation, is to limit liability. Yep. And I think this needs to be a part of our analysis in the future when looking at this situation. It's not just, Benjamin Netanyahu's a war criminal or Trump is, or name whatever state actor. It's the whole system. Yeah. This whole corporate profit-seeking system, and every aspect of it is complicit. And until we can come to terms with that, not only this occupation of genocide not only will this one continue, but we are going to continue to see this form of capital extraction from occupied peoples all over the world and in the future. Yeah. And I think that is in the essence of what capitalism and imperialism is, Geordie. Yeah. A damning report and an excellent analysis on your behalf, James.
Thank you.
I'll just say, if Marco Rubio thinks that Francesca Albanese is committing warfare, then I say to her, good on her, please keep on fighting.
Keep up the bloody good fight. And the thing about Francesca Albanese is that she's probably one of the bravest people on the planet. Yeah. Because someone in a position like her, the people in similar positions speaking out so vocally and with the authority that she has, people have been killed and had their families killed and threatened for a lot less.
You could speculate that she is in the sights of people for sure.
Absolutely. And if anything does happen, that will be an absolute tragedy for humankind. I think she, like I said, is a shining example of the goodness inside of people and also the goodness and the benefit that multilateral global institutions like the UN and the ICC and the ICJ, for all their many flaws, there is, at the end of the day, a nugget of like virtuous good at the heart of it, and we need to pursue that and hold that and protect that as long as we can.
Sure. All right, James, let's wrap it up.
No worries. Everyone, if you like the video, like, comment, subscribe. Thank you for listening to me, Geordie.
No worries. As always, we'll see you later. Thanks.
See you guys.